Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on how not to get sued. My name is Scott Clasen here at ProfitSolv, and we will be starting our webinar in just about another minute or so. There's a number of people I see who are trickling into the webinar room, so you have an opportunity to, let's see, if you're on the East Coast, grab the late lunch. Midwest, Mountain Time Zone, grab your lunch. Another maybe morning cup of coffee for those of you joining us from the Pacific Time Zone. So we'll jump in another minute or so, and Brad and I, my esteemed panelists today, we'll get started. So again, you have about a minute or so. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I am going to go ahead and get started. A few more people did jump in here to the webinar. So let's get right to it. Once again, welcome to today's webinar, How Not to Get Sued, presented by Brad Barkin, who is at MBroker, a new partner with ProfitSolv. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Scott Clasen, Director of Marketing with ProfitSolv. And I will be today's host and serve as the kind of conduit between some questions that you all might have for Brad, and really just sort of help to understand how, as lawyers, we can make sure that we're mitigating the risk that we have and just heck, not get sued. So with that being said, I want to introduce Brad from MBroker. So Brad, welcome, thanks, and I'll let you take it away here.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for having me. Looking forward to this. So I think folks on this call will find you and I have a little bit of back and forth, realize that how not to get sued kind of dovetails to an insurance topic. So we'll try to keep this a little bit light, realizing that insurance is not exactly what everybody would love to talk about, but we'll try to keep things interesting, or as interesting as possible.
I do want to say real quick before, in that vein, for those of you that have questions during the course of our session here today, you should see a Q&A icon near the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask your questions as they sort of come to you. I may not necessarily get to them immediately, and we are definitely going to leave time near the end of the webinar to address any questions we were not able to get to. And everyone is on mute, so it will be type your questions only. And if we don't get to your question right away, we will get to it near the end. Brad and I built in a little buffer time between when this presentation should wrap up and before the end of the hour, as we do have a full hour scheduled here. So I wanted to kind of just take care of some of that housekeeping items, Brad. Sorry about that.
No, all good. And if people want to, if there are questions we don't get to on this, I can email people back, and if there are more specific questions folks have about running their firms, practice management, I'm happy to handle those things too, even after this call or outside of it. So here we go. Here's a little bit about a quick overview on MBroker. We are fortunate enough to pair with Scott and ProfitSolv, so we're super excited about that. I'll tell you a little bit about how and why that actually matters. In terms of why MBroker exists, we're here to help your law firm. We're here to help your law firm buy a product and that you absolutely need, which is insurance. Insurance in terms of legal malpractice insurance or errors and omissions, professional liability. Those are kind of all the same things. So we're here to help with that, in addition to any other lines of coverage that your firm might need. As I said before, we realized when the company was founded, and when I came here to head up this practice for law firms, that 100% of law firms need insurance, and probably 0% enjoy talking about it. Maybe there's a few out there, but we're here to make insurance much simpler than it historically has been, far easier on you and far more cost effective, which I think is very important. It's also important to know that the way that we achieve that is through using technology, but also people, right? So there's a misnomer, I think, when people see what we're doing, that it's just 100%, artificial intelligence driven or something like this, or algorithms. That helps us. It helps us achieve cost savings, but the team behind us is, when people give us reviews, is really why people enjoy working with us. So for ProfitSolv customers, we also have a belief that if you are using technology like ProfitSolv provides you, that you are probably a better run law firm. And so for that, with customers using those kind of tools, it actually translates into cost savings when you go to purchase your malpractice insurance from an underwriting perspective. And we can get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, actually. Of like, and probably a lot of lawyers don't maybe even think about. I hadn't even thought about till you brought it up, that what their tech stack looks like actually can impact the rates that they can, get. It's sort of like, with car insurance, you're going to get better coverage on, a car that has better safety ratings than that, 73, Chevy Impala, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like there's just too many firms that are out there running themselves on Microsoft Excel and some pens and papers, and that leads to trouble, frankly.
Well, and again, I don't want to sidetrack too much, but we've talked to firms at ProfitSolv that, they're still running Windows Vista or Windows XP, old operating systems that are no longer supported, huge security risk, right? So they maybe don't understand that's a huge liability factor that they shouldn't be living with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, in the next kind of, say, 30 minutes or so that we'll fly through these slides, the biggest things that we'll cover is what exactly are your law firm's exposures and how you can go about protecting yourself. I think a lot of people start up a law firm, get it going, get on client, get clients rolled in, have some good positive revenue flow, but they realize, like, holy smokes, I have no idea what I'm vulnerable to, and how do I protect, this business that I built. I'll go through and talk about statistically what are the biggest risks. I think numbers are always fun, and actuarial data is always kind of interesting. Hopefully,
says the insurance guy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Gotta love an actuary. Hopefully, have another resource to ask questions in our company, whether or not you're a customer of ours or not. You're a customer of ProfitSolv, so we are here to be a better resource for you. And then law firms love a better deal. We love providing a better deal, so we'll talk to you about that too. Insurance obviously can be an expensive topic, probably one of your most expensive things you have to purchase every year. So if you could save a few bucks on that and save some time, we'd love to teach you how to do that too.
So before you dive into that, let's do some interactiveness here with everyone who's attending. We're talking about, obviously the topic, how to make sure you don't get sued. But I'm going to launch a poll here, and I'm curious, how many of you have been sued? In your however long you've been practicing law. So go ahead, it's just a simple yes, no. Have you been sued in your legal career? And I'll give a couple of a good 30 seconds for people to contemplate the yes, no to that. Shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, we find that statistic, we'll get to the number that what the ABA tells us in terms of how often you're likely to get sued, specific to malpractice, right? We're just running malpractice, but in the course of running a firm, you can get sued for all kinds of things, like employment-related stuff, cyber breaches nowadays. So we'll talk about those things too.
Well, the good news is, and I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. It looks like we're a pretty good group here. 88% of our attendees have not been sued in their legal career. So they, I think, buck the averages that we're going to see here. So I'll let you continue. That's interesting.
Yeah, you have better run law firms.
There you go.
Probably because you're using your technology.
It's all because of ProfitSolv, really, right? We'll take all the credit.
So here are, and I will get to that number in a second, but in terms of what your exposures are for a law firm, this is at a super high level. But these are probably the top 5, let's say. And then what you'll see on the left is what exactly the exposure is if you're sitting in the chair of running your law firm. And then what you see on the right is the insurance policy that's there to cover it. So statistically, the biggest area and the biggest exposure is malpractice, right? So claims in the course of providing a professional service. That is what professional liability covers. If you hear the term professional liability, malpractice insurance, errors and omissions, or E&O for short, that is all exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So yeah, they're used interchangeably depending on whom you talk to. In the past, as you can imagine, 10 to 15 years, cyber and privacy liability has really snuck up. And so we are seeing many law firms, probably the majority of law firms these days, even small firms, having some semblance of cyber and privacy liability. And part of it is because good lawyering can prevent professional liability. Good lawyering and even a good IT team really cannot often, sadly, prevent cyber and privacy liability exposures. So when we talk to firm owners and you talk to them about these things, the idea really is like, if a claim came through and you told people that you weren't carrying cyber liability insurance, that would be a bit of a head scratcher. In today's day and age, it seems appropriate that you should, as a fundamental part of running a firm. Employment practices liability is these are areas where if you were to get sued by one of your employees or a third party for harassment, discrimination, wrongful termination, obviously is a big one. You can imagine that, especially in a state like California, where it's just super employee friendly, anybody that gets fired can have some recourse, whether they were fired for all the right reasons or not. It's super easy for them to go back and sue you and go ahead and get an employment lawyer, and then you're stuck defending yourself. So employment practices liability, especially as firms grow, has become very prominent. And then, those top three are kind of what I would consider professional lines. And then you have more like the kind of traditional lines. Workers' compensation, if you have any employees, is a statutory or required coverage in most states. So you probably have to have that. Your payroll provider might even offer it to you. So it makes it pretty easy to roll it in that way. And then a business owner's policy for smaller firms covers your property damage and general liability. Most firms, if they're working from home, or even if they're at an office sharing site, might not be required to have a business owner's policy, but some landlords and tenants will actually require you to have that coverage. And it's usually pretty inexpensive.
It's interesting, like looking at the different types of policies, besides the ones that we sort of all think of normal. And I think I gravitate towards that cyber and privacy liability. And again, what interests me most is just today, and I've gotten this a lot, this example, and it just happened about an hour and a half ago, because, like for ProfitSolv, most of the communication via email comes with my name, Scott Clasen, and then periodically, and an hour ago I'll get emails accidentally from law firms where they were trying to communicate to somebody named Scott, probably. They started typing, and how Outlook can auto, populate who you're sending it to. And they inadvertently sent me information that I shouldn't be getting about some matter they're working on. And that's just good, practice of again, this goes back to the data privacy type stuff, is making sure that you are doing things cleanly, sharing documents properly, and so on and so forth, and having the liability insurance that covers that is an important stool to that, a pillar to making that happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, email mistakes happen a lot. I've seen, and that we don't belabor this point, but somebody that we work with, they had an employee who was no longer actually working on behalf of the firm, but somehow still had email access to the firm's server and sent an email out to a client on old letterhead, and that firm got no benefit, but they were the deep pocket and wanted to pay, a seven-figure loss, which is crazy.
Wow.
So anyways, here's the number. So 80% of this is according to the ABA, 80% of lawyers will get sued during their career specific to legal malpractice. Daunting number. That's what the statistics show. So this is a big reason why legal malpractice insurance tends to be so expensive, right? Because most lawyers at some point in time will get sued. It doesn't mean that they're actually have had any real liability, or maybe they didn't actually pay out, but they had to retain a defense attorney, et cetera, to go ahead and defend themselves. So here is, when we talk to law firms a lot, they're often one of their questions is why is it so expensive, and what am I doing? What what makes my practice risky? So what you're seeing here are from an actuarial standpoint, what the numbers tell insurance companies. These are the riskiest areas of practice, not necessarily in order. But for example, mergers and acquisitions, depending on the kind of deals that you're working on, if something goes haywire and a deal falls through, it is very easy for that person to point the finger at the lawyer for ruining the deal, and then the lawyer is culpable or responsible for any damages that either party might have received. Estate and trust has always been problematic, right? And this is people acting. The classic example is generational wealth being passed on from mom and dad to siblings, infighting between siblings, the lawyer acting as trustee or distributing funds,
Right.
and then pointing the finger at the lawyer saying they screwed it up. And as you can imagine, the more wealth, the more the money grab, and the more likelihood there is for the lawyer to get sued. So if you're just drafting templates, that's one thing. If you're acting as administrator of a trust, if you have discretionary authority on management of funds, if you have check writing authority, all those things kind of ratchet up the exposure and make it more likely for something to go wrong. And then, just picking on a couple of these other ones, medical malpractice, especially on the plaintiff side, those things for any personal injury attorneys on here are very aware that, your standard auto accident is very different in terms of personal injury than a surgeon doing something wrong, right? The dollars that are at stake of wrongful death are massive. And if you screw that up, on behalf of your client, and they don't get the damage that they felt like they were entitled to, they will invariably go after the lawyer and ask them for compensation for having screwed that up.
Brad, do you have any color? The one that kind of jumps out is a little interesting to me. Well, there's two. I mean, entertainment, I can sort of see, breach of contract type of stuff. But environmental, do you have any color as to what makes environmental law particularly risky?
Yeah, oil and gas.
Okay.
The dollars
Sure.
that are involved there. Yeah. You can imagine, especially in the Southeast, that's a big deal. Or any kind of even you could argue maybe pollution exposures get kind of bucketed into environmental, and there's obviously big dollars at play there too for any kind of pollution lawsuits that are going on. So that's what that's about.
Interesting.
The question we get asked on this one, Scott, a lot for anybody, it's like, okay, here's 9 things that are risky. So what isn't? What is statistically doesn't involve claims? So those are like immigration, very low, statistically lower risk, criminal defense, insurance defense, most things on the defense side. General business corporate is looked at as neutral. Administrative law, contract review is looked at as neutral. And then these 9 are looked at as that you would debit it because it's a higher risk.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So here is, in terms of how not to get sued, I think this is a good one that people kind of ought to pay attention to. And so what you'll see here is, and this again comes from the ABA. So here, and it's the ABA having pulled a number of different insurance companies to provide statistical data in order to educate lawyers. So what I find interesting on this is that if you look at some of these, so you have substantive error, intentional, administrative, and then client relations. So on client relations and administrative in particular, which make up a pretty healthy chunk of this pie, these are things that are within your control, right? So
yes.
Failure to meet deadlines, failure to file documents, conflicts, better communication, failure to file client instructions. So these are things like, if you have technology, it mitigates a lot of these things, particularly on their administrative. And then on client relations, if you can do some standard fundamental best practices in terms of documenting your file, communicating with your client, recapping phone conversations via email and in writing to make sure that people understand, it prevents a lot. You're not always going to be, it doesn't necessarily prevent you from, somebody alleging that you failed to know or apply the law.
Right.
But it goes a long way.
And I think this is where TimeSolv comes in a little bit. We have a tool, conflicts check. You can do conflict checking. in TimeSolv. So you eliminate that conflicts of interest bullet point. Even that failure to explain fees and processes, et cetera, is you don't want anybody to ever question your invoice. So when you create your time entries in TimeSolv, making sure that you have well-described time entries. And one of the tools that we have is the ability to create abbreviations so that you can use a uniform, you can insert, all you have to do is enter like say 2 letters and then a space, and you could have 3-4 sentences come up that describes a time entry. It creates a uniform language of a well-described work that you're doing that you don't have to spend a lot of time actually creating. You set it up once at the beginning, it's done. Everyone across the board can use the same time entry description. So it eliminates questions. I'm not going to pay my bill because, you didn't, I don't, it was unclear, it was ambiguous, invoicing and so on. So again, you're right. Technology comes into play here, and everyone sitting on here who uses TimeSolv, you already have some of these tools, in hand.
Yeah, probably why most people haven't gotten sued so much, right? Better than that.
Right, exactly. Okay, we'll bring it back. It's all TimeSolv's.
Excellent. Cool. So here is, people often ask, what do I have to look out for? So I have very common exclusions and cheap policies, and that's because there are some outfits out there that are very low cost insurance providers. But to be fair, there are some of these exclusions that are in just about every single insurance policy out there, particularly for malpractice. The cheap policies, I would say, have more exclusions and provide the carrier a better way to kind of get out of a claim if they really needed to. But it's important to know that most insurance providers for legal malpractice who have been doing it a long time are not trying to get out of a claim. They truly aren't. Like they actually want you, if you have a claim, ideally you will have gone through that and want to be a customer of theirs for forever, right? Because they handled the claim so well. But that said, as a consumer and somebody who's running the law practice, there are just some things you probably should be aware of. Prior knowledge on the top left is the biggest one, and that is in every single insurance policy. So we're going to spend a minute on that on the next slide. So I'll skip over it now. Fines and penalties. Generally speaking, nobody is going to provide you an insurance policy if you are fined or penalized. That is not what insurance is for. And then same with fraud, right? Or if you make a promise, a warranty or guarantee, like if you tell somebody, hey, I promise you that if we go through this divorce, I'm going to get you, 80% of this guy's assets. Yeah. No, you can't put that kind of stuff in writing. But if there's a caveat there. So if absent of that, you would have been liable anyways. Yes, the policy is there to respond. The one that jumps out, and I say like cheap policies. If you look at that bottom right, a goofy one is like intoxication. So there's a policy that's floating around out there that we'll see from a particular carrier, and it effectively says, and this is a perfect example of how a lawyer or a carrier can try to get out of something. And the exclusion reads something along the lines of, if you are providing legal advice while intoxicated, this policy shall not respond. And so the scary part is, how often have you gone out with with a client and met them for a happy hour, met them for a dinner, and you have a couple glasses of wine, and you're not necessarily intoxicated, not at all, but because they're a client, you are talking through with them. And if the carrier were to find out about that, it just gives them another way out, right? So having a good broker to kind of talk you through these things, or a good advisor on your insurance, goes a long way to make sure that you're not getting a quote unquote cheap policy.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I think every eye probably gravitated towards, what do you mean intoxication?
Right. That's not standard. I mean, some of these other ones are there frequently, like ownership interest is going to be in most policies, but there's varying levels of threshold, right? So if you're providing legal advice to an entity and you have a couple percentage points ownership in them, like that's okay. But if you're the majority owner in an entity and you're providing legal services to them, or it's like your spouse, and your spouse tries to sue you for wrongful legal advice, then that's not going to be covered.
Not to mention you're probably sleeping on the couch.
Yeah. So this is a big one. I mean, I would say like this is, and anytime I give one of these conversations, Scott, this is always the thing that I want people to kind of leave with. The number one reason for a policy to not respond is what's called prior knowledge. And the basic premise here is that an insurance company is never going to issue a policy to a burning house, right? Like if the house is on fire, you can't go out and buy a policy for it. Same thing for lawyers. If you knew that something had gone wrong and your policy, you knew it and you didn't report it to anybody, and your policy renews and you said you were not aware of any claims, and then lo and behold, it bubbles up and becomes an issue, the insurance company is going to ask you for some files on this claim and some background information. If they find out that you knew about this matter or should have known this matter would result in a legal malpractice claim, they're going to deny you for coverage. And that is pretty much standard operating procedure across any insurance company. So the next question, the follow-up question, the natural follow-up question is well, like what constitutes a potential claim? And if I report it, do I get dinged? Does it go against my file? So for a good insurance company, no. Like if you're reporting something in an abundance of caution and you just want to get the insurance carrier on your side and have them note the file, no, that does not go against you. That's a good best practice, right? You reach out to the carrier, get them involved. It's not for everything, right? It's not just because your client went bankrupt and maybe they'll point the finger at you. It's if you realize you made a mistake, or maybe you missed a statute, or maybe you're out to lunch and your client says like, "Hey Scott, I'm really not too sure about that advice you gave me, because I think the advice you gave me may have screwed up that contract that I was in line to get." Just telling you kind of thing. But they haven't actually said anything to you in writing that that Scott specifically screwed up and I was harmed. But if you get the sense that something went wrong, you'll consult your insurance broker. They can talk you through it, but you should report it. It's terrible to see when firms are spending thousands of dollars on these policies and they go to report a matter thinking that the policy is going to respond. And then lo and behold, it doesn't, because they just forgot to tell the company within enough time. So again, a good broker or a good insurance advisor can talk you through this, when to report it. But if there's one takeaway from it, from this conversation, I would say this would be it.
So just always kind of be more cautious than you maybe think you need to be.
Yeah.
I think, and a lot of people, and again, as a layman who doesn't have to, had to worry about purchasing insurance for my company, I think everyone feels like, oh, if I ever talk to anybody, my insurance person about a claim, my rates are going to go up. That's like, you think car insurance. I'm not going to report that I, had the fender bender because I don't want my rates to go up. And that's not what you're saying is, hey, you're not going to get dinged.
Not the case, right? Like, that's not exactly it. And then
it's
the
an
other
urban myth at this point for so much of insurance that that I think everybody believes that if they report a claim for anything in life that they have insurance for, that means their rates are going to automatically just go up.
Right, and that's not the case. It's okay to be careful and be cautious on things. And then the other one, the classic one for lawyers is that they think, and accountants are kind of this way too. Like they think they can just cure it, right? Like, so if the client says you screwed up, like they just like, well, I'm not going to say anything because I'll make this better. Like I always make things better. Like we'll find a way to get around this. And then, sometimes that works and everything's fine, but sometimes it doesn't. And when the times when it doesn't are when, you should have said something to the insurance company so that you make sure you kind of lock in coverage. Here's another one. I think whenever we're talking to law firms, they often are like, hey, like this insurance thing is, like a sham. Why is it so expensive? Why exactly are you charging me this much? So I think the numbers are interesting. And obviously you'll see that these are kind of round, right? We kind of broke it up into quarters in terms of cost. But one thing to note is that insurance companies, especially on legal malpractice, they really don't make that much money, right? So it's not like they're gouging you and just making money hand over fist. In fact, like their loss ratios, they're barely eking out a couple points of profit, and then they make money on the investment income. And that's across the board. Like in some companies in certain years, especially like in a down economy, they lose money on legal malpractice because lawyers have so many claims. So how does the premium get calculated? You'll see those 5 items right there. And those are effectively in order of how it affects your premium. So it's where are you located? If you're in Fargo, North Dakota, it's going to be cheaper than if you're in Los Angeles. The number of attorneys and tenure. So if you're 2 attorneys and you just started your organization last year, It's going to be cheaper because you don't have as many prior liabilities than if you'd been doing this since the 80s, right? Because it covers you for anything that would have come up in the past in terms of services performed. Your areas of practice, which is what we just talked about, right? So an immigration firm is going to be cheaper pretty much than somebody doing plaintiff med mal. Risk management. So what kind of practice management tools are you using? Are you using technology like ProfitSolv, or are you using engagement letters? Are you suing people for fees to try to collect them? All these things get weighed into it, and you'll see that on pretty much every insurance application. They'll ask you some very fundamental risk management questions, and then claims, right? If you've had claims, depending how severe or they are or aren't, that'll affect things too. So again, if you reported a couple things, the insurance carrier spent a couple grand on it, getting defense counsel, but it really didn't go anywhere else. Like, that's fine. But if you had a couple claims and they were, $500,000, less fine, right? Like, so your premiums are gonna wind up being up. And if you do have claims, it becomes even more important to have a good insurance broker or advisor who can kind of help navigate that for you and kind of tell your story to the insurance carriers so that you do get a better deal.
A couple of things on that, if I could jump in quick, that I think of. I have two questions, really. Well, one comment and a question. The risk management and, do you chase fees? I know that a lot of insurance carriers actively discourage their lawyers that they cover from trying to sue for, uncollected invoices for a variety of reasons. One, because they could be countersued because, hey, I'm not paying you because. And two, because I know from what I've been told, a lot of the courts will say, hey, lawyers have an inherent advantage when they sue because they know the legal system well. So one of the things we've tried to really instill into TimeSolv customers is making it easy to collect your payment. So we have tools in place, and this won't be a pitch for these necessarily, of being able to easily store payment information, for example, like a client's banking information, credit card information, and then you can run charges on those when you're ready. So you're kind of almost guaranteed collecting on those invoices. So that's one thing I think enough lawyers maybe don't think about. How much easier can I make it to get paid? And TimeSolv has the tools. And the question I had was, did you see any of this, like these cost ratios and the number of claims and so on? Did COVID, I know this is kind of a curveball question. Did COVID impact any of these numbers one way or another?
The early data I've seen, and I have seen some, is the answer is no. So, some law firms I think were harmed in early stages, just early days, not necessarily because of claims, but just revenue flow and receivables. Like that was it. But by and large, I think most of the firms that we've been hearing from and talking to, either anecdotally or through some other third parties who have done research on this, is the answer has been no. Law firms predominantly fared well. And claims, we did expect, usually claims go down when the economy, or claims go up. Claims increase when the economy goes down. We haven't really seen that. We haven't seen a huge uptick. There has been a bit of an uptick, but not massive. A lot of large law firms had an uptick of claims, but not necessarily the smaller ones. So the other thing on this quickly is that, and it'll kind of segue into the next slide, is that one of the reasons that insurance is expensive is you'll see 50% of the cost of your policy is basically there to pay for claims, and then the other 50% is administration and distribution. So you're paying to feed a lot of different mouths in the food chain when you get like a PDF application that you have to fill out. So we'll talk about that next here. Again, a little bit of a dovetail into what MBroker is doing, and why we're working with TimeSolv, and why Scott and his company have elected to work with us. So if you were to look back at this slide, this other 50%, this administration and distribution, that's the area that a technology company like ours with good expertise, that's where we feel like we can help, right? So we want to be able to be there and pay claims, like that's what the policy is there for. But if we can cut out some of the fat on the administration and distribution, that's what matters. So administration and distribution means paying underwriters, paying different entities along the food chain, so to speak, of by the time the first person you talk to, then enter any intermediaries between the person you're talking to and then the insurance company. We're here to help with that. And so with MBroker, we'll use technology to cut out a lot of that fat and then pass those savings in terms of dollars along to you. So what we're here for is to receive, you want you to receive the right coverage at the right price, have people you can talk to about it, and we'll give you guidance along the way. If you wanted to access our insurance policies, you can access it by coming directly to us at MBroker and talking to anybody from me or my team. I think we're quite good at what we do, and the feedback that we get, with generally speaking, says the same in terms of NPS scores and other reviews. You also can, if you have an insurance broker that you like very much, want to explore being covered by MBroker, we do have opportunities for your insurance broker to reach out to us and interact with us so that they can be the conduit. Yeah, and so if folks have that, they can have their insurance broker even reach out to me or check out Emboker.com, and there's ways we can onboard those insurance brokers. But effectively, what we're doing is we want to be able to use technology to kind of displace some of that back and forth in the distribution. So
Right.
with a lot of our law firms, what'll happen is they'll come on, they'll apply, and then they'll get a quote right away. And I can show you kind of what that workflow looks like. And so rather than having a lot of entities long and you filling out PDF applications and it taking days to get back to you, and there's lots of questions and things you don't really understand, it happens much faster. So the workflow that we have, and this is what people see, and I'm conscious of time here, Scott, so I'll kind of go through this fast, but if you go to MBroker.com, you'll see that there's various lines of coverage that we'll suggest to you once we identify that you're a law firm. And then for legal malpractice in particular, we'll ask you some basic questions. A lot of the things I told you go into the cost. So who are your lawyers? When did they get hired? And what do you do for your practice areas? We'll ask you a few risk management questions. And then effectively, 80% of firms, generally speaking, who apply with us will get a quote right away. And they'll rather than having to go through their broker or other insurance intermediary and ask for different derivatives on deductible or limits or this and that, we want to be really transparent. So what'll happen is a firm will come through and they'll get a quote, and you'll see all those different drop-down buckets. So this one here, if the firm was Brad Barkin Law, $2 million limit with a $10,000 deductible, is priced at $4,600. But if I wanted to see what it would look like if I only carried $1 million of limit, or what if I increased my deductible or decreased my deductible, or I want defense costs to be covered outside because I'm worried that like my practice area is a little more litigious and I want to have really good defense counsel. I don't want to erode those $2 million. I have options for that too. And so I can change those things and then recalculate the premium to find out what suits my needs and my budget. And it's all live. And you also can, of course, talk to our team at any time on these issues. So we find this works, fairly well, especially in today's day and age. Insurance is incredibly antiquated. And then for firms who want it, you can go through, you'll basically sign a couple of items and you can elect to bind coverage right on the spot. So we'll have firms do this kind of at all hours of the day and night, just coming through and doing this on their own, self-serving if they want, or talking to our team.
And this is a real paradigm shift for, I think, a lot of firms probably in how to go about purchasing insurance. The idea of being able to do it online, not having to talk to, you alluded to, filling out PDF documents. This is kind of new school, right? In how you actually acquire your policies.
Right. Yeah. New for insurance, but, standard fare for, a lot of other things, right? Like if you ever go through and, if you've played even like car application, like if you looked at, if you're like screwed around like a Tesla website, I mean, you can get a car like this now, right? So it's just a much more modern way of thinking about things. Without a lot of the things people don't like is the lack of transparency in terms of the pricing. So with this, we think this provides a lot of transparency for folks. And then you can, once you do it, there's various ways of paying. So there's kind of an overlay here, but you'll generally get that screen in the bottom left. Click on it, go to payments, and people can pay immediately if they want to, credit card, ACH, send us a check, or they can also see financing options. We'll use a third-party bank so they can see that too immediately, what that would cost them. So cash flow issues obviously are a real thing for law firms, and they can kind of space things out as needed.
And I really like the fact, I know you mentioned it, but I would like to just that if you have a trusted insurance person currently, the fact that that doesn't preclude you from exploring the options that MBroker has, that MBroker will work with your existing insurance person. I think I just really like that point.
Yep, you can, and those, their existing brokers or advisors, insurance professionals can just reach out to us or put through an inquiry or send an email to me too, and I can set that up. That's easy enough. Okay, I'll also go through here quickly on these last items. So so that kind of wraps up the section on malpractice insurance. In terms of like that digital flow, people can buy other lines of insurance with a cyber liability, employment practices liability, business owners policies. Those are all available in a very similar digital flow. We spent the most time on legal malpractice because that's a firm's biggest expense, and all firms are carrying or should be carrying legal malpractice insurance. Cyber liability, of course, is a big one. The biggest question we could ask is what exactly does that cover? So in today's day and age, the biggest thing, anecdotally, because it's been in the press a lot, but also statistically, is related to ransomware and cybercrime. So extortion, things of this nature. It covers you for first and third party claims. So if it happened, within the organization or somebody hacked you, it's going to cover you for that. I think a big part what people don't understand is that you might have a third-party IT provider or somebody else, and those people are pretty good. But if you get a ransomware or an extortion deal, they are not going to know what to do. So with these insurance companies, and by the way, these insurance companies, they don't know exactly what to do either, which is why your policy pays for an expert that will be engaged on behalf of you and the insurance company who does, right? So if you are with X insurance company, they know that their people aren't keen on doing this, so they've outsourced it to specialists. At least the better policies have. And I think costs are going up on this, year over year because claims happen more frequently. The criminals have just gotten better, but I continue to think it's one of the best values you can get in terms of providing your firm, protecting your firm. It's probably actually underpriced right now for what it needs to be. So we're seeing budget for like a 1 or 2 attorney firm, depending on where you are. It's usually between $1,000 and $2,000, depending on limits and a few other items. And then EPL. So I just had a firm go through this, and she was telling me that they started a firm and they just started onboarding clients, and things were all rosy, and they started expanding, and then lo and behold, she never even thought this could happen. But the administrator that they love so much, all of a sudden sued them for a variety of issues upon her departure, and they couldn't believe it. But now all of a sudden they're left holding the bag, and they've paid tens of thousands of dollars in defense costs. And she's like, I never even knew that something like this existed. So their generalist broker never even thought to educate them on these things. I think coming to a specialist like MBroker or others who specialize in law firms can advise you of these kinds of things. Like employment practices happen a lot. Especially in California, where it's very employee friendly. So we are starting to see a lot of firms buy this, and even if it's lower limits, just to be able to protect themselves in the event that for like defense costs if they have to engage an attorney, because it is just so easy to if you terminate someone, for them to kind of go back and say, hey, this is wrong. I never deserve to be fired, or I was underpaid, or pick an issue. It's a law firm or any business owner is kind of smart to have an employment practices liability policy in place. Again, the most expensive claim is this is very much insurance speak, but the most expensive claim is the one you're not properly protected against. So we've seen firms be kind of bare on or naked on certain policies. It's smart to protect yourself, or at least be educated if you want to self-insure on certain things. And then that also is kind of dovetails into having good practice management, having good risk management, and knowing how to protect yourself. So the 3 takeaways here that I would say, kind of to sum this up, if you're going to remember 3 things, is I said poll, like report claims, poll your attorneys, poll your professionals if they're aware of anything, and then if anything bubbles up, you talk to your insurance advisor or reach out to us at MBroker. We are happy to have those conversations all of the time and talk you through it in terms of what you should or shouldn't report. But don't have a claim get denied because of prior knowledge. Use one good or smart broker. If you want to invite some friendly competition along the way, great. Some firms get a little too aggressive, and they'll have like 3 or 4 or 5 different brokers shopping for coverage every year, which just creates a mess for everybody involved. It's just no good. It's a huge waste of your time and everybody else's. So Yeah, but have a good broker who knows how to navigate a law firm and its risks. And then the last one is, just protect and grow your bottom line. So we want you to, Scott and I both want law firms to be successful. We love that, using tools like ProfitSolv and as a kind of front end risk management tool are great. And then getting some insurance on the back end to protect you and allow you to go freely operate and flourish. That's kind of the name of the game. So that is it. Again, Scott, we probably have time for some questions, but there's my contact information. If folks have other things, they can certainly email me too. But that kind of sums up the presentation here.
Well, thanks, Brad. And anybody who we do have a question or a comment on some kind of clarification, perhaps. But then if others want to add questions as well, but we did have somebody who wanted to explore a little bit more about prior events. And, you made the comment that, you've been in business a long time. The insurance policy will cover prior years, but just the comment was really about, making sure the new policy has full prior acts included. So, he had 2 points: that if you're purchasing coverage for the first time, but you've actually been providing services before that first policy, making sure you have full prior acts. And then if you change carriers that move that retroactive date of the new policy, that can be a big concern too. So he actually just suggested maybe a even better description to, for everybody here about full prior acts, what's that mean, and making sure that when you're purchasing the coverage, that's something you're paying attention to, I think.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And I'm guilty of kind of glossing over it quickly in the interest of time, but that is correct. So every policy will have a retroactive date or a prior acts date, and it will stay with you as long as you continuously buy legal malpractice insurance, right? So and they don't want you should not have a gap in coverage. So if you start your law firm today and you started buying coverage on October 6th, 2021, and you continuously buy it, you are covered for services performed from this date forward, so long as if you ever have a claim. If you decided to take a year off and stop buying insurance, the insurance companies will say, well, like, that's fine, but we're not going to cover you for acts performed from prior years. So that's why that retroactive date, you'll always see an insurance company asking about that, and that's what that is. It winds up being very confusing because it's not a very intuitive term. What's a retroactive date? But that's effectively what this person is alluding to is you're covered as long as you continue to buy coverage. For firms that have been doing it a long time, the retroactive date might say non-applicable or full prior acts, which means that as long as Brad Barkin law has been in business, and it's going to be this policy is going to cover me for any claim that's ever been made against me in my entity. So, but most firms will have some kind of a retroactive date on there, and that's why it's important to keep buying the insurance, especially malpractice.
One thing that probably also, again, as a layman here, where that prior knowledge comes into play too, because his first point of maybe you haven't purchased a policy before, but I've been practicing I want to purchase my policy today, but I set up shop on January 1st and just never got around to it. So I've been providing services for the last 9 months, and it's that, hey, do you have any prior knowledge of, things that happened in the last 9 months that you potentially there could be claims for, right? So I think that's just an important, talking point when you have the conversations with your broker about retroactive date and prior acts, right?
Exactly. And this is a topic that, I've had 30-minute, hour-long conversations with firms exactly diving into this very topic. I'm working with a firm now who they let their coverage lapse for a year. They had a couple claims and they want to try to get prior acts coverage, and we can't. It is just not available. Yeah. And so that's a real concern, and that's why it continues to be important to actually have to renew that policy every single year. But so talking to your advisor they can hopefully navigate that for you, or we can.
Okay. Somebody asked, will we send this presentation out? The answer is yes. This is being recorded, this webinar. There will be a follow-up email where you can watch this at your leisure, which leads me to two. First of all, if there's other questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A section that you see down below with the icon. Feel free to keep cranking those. But I do want to, and I'm going to put this in the chat section of the webinar, because you're a ProfitSolv client, sitting in here today, there is the opportunity to if you qualify, receive a 10% discount off of premium enhanced professional liability coverage. So if you go to that URL that I just put in the chat for everyone, and get it started an instant quote there, if you qualify, you can get that 10% discount. And that's part of, the TimeSolv philosophy here is we want to bring added value to your subscription on using our service. And, partnering with MBroker is one of those things of the added value that we want to offer to you all. So on that, continue on that thought, one last poll question here. Would you like to learn more about MBroker's liability insurance solutions? If you answer yes, I'll pass that information on to Brad and his team. And if you don't, that's understood as well. If now's not the right time. So obviously I'm not going to make this, a public, whatever. I'm not going to show everybody the results, but if you answer yes, we'll be able to capture that and get those, get you over in front of Brad and his team. So, so one question that did come in from somebody who's actually a consulting firm, not a law firm, can MBroker customize for that case? I think it's a good point that you don't handle just the legal firms, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we absolutely help loads of other businesses of all walks of life, and we do handle a lot of consulting firms. So yeah, feel free you could shoot me a note. Happy to give some guidance there too.
I think the idea is and same thing with time, a lot of, there are some, a certain percent of TimeSolv users that are non-legal, but the professional services industry, consulting firms, accounting firms, PR agencies, marketing firms, even IT firms, you're offering professional services. A lot of the type of liability coverage you need, it doesn't, it's not radically different, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it starts with professional liability for a professional service firm. And then a lot of the other lines tend to be similar. That's right. I would say the cost for a law firm tends to be higher than most other professional service providers for reasons you probably can, you can understand.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in right now. So like I said, just a minute or two ago, I'll send out an email with a link where you can watch this recording again. It'll also include a link to that URL that I threw in the chat, so you can take advantage of potentially a 10% discount. And then for those that marked that they were interested in learning more about MBroker and their policies, we'll make sure that we pass your information on to Brad and expect them to reach out and have a deeper conversation as needed. So unless anybody has any other questions, Brad, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I think it was I don't know about anybody else. I learned a lot about, the do's and don'ts of making sure that, you do everything in your power not to get sued. And if you do, making sure that you are with a partner that you trust to help you navigate those what could be stormy waters when that does happen. So thanks for your time, Brad. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here with everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend as we creep up. We're past hump day today, I guess. So have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.